Monday, October 21st, 1907, 10:15 a.m. On Wall Street, a crowd gathers outside the Knickerbocker Trust Company. Panic spreads as depositors rush to withdraw their savings. The bank's doors remain closed, its coffers empty. Across the city, other financial institutions teeter on the brink of collapse. As the crisis deepens, one man emerges as America's last hope, JPMorgan, the most powerful banker in the country. With no central bank to turn to, the fate of the nation's economy rests in his hands. But can a private citizen really save an entire financial system from ruin? And if he succeeds, at what cost to America's democratic ideals? The panic of 1907 didn't happen overnight. Months of financial instability had set the stage for disaster. In March, the New York Stock Exchange suffered a sharp decline, losing nearly 10% of its value in just a few weeks. By October, the situation had become critical. The trigger came from an unexpected source, a failed attempt to corner the market on United Copper Company stock. When the scheme collapsed, it took down several banks and brokerage firms with it. Now, as news of the Knickerbocker Trust's closure spread, fear gripped the city. J.P. Morgan, 70 years old and semi-retired, was summoned from his library. As he made his way to Wall Street, the question on everyone's mind was, could even the great Morgan stem this tide of panic? Morgan wasted no time. He gathered the city's top bankers in his library, locking the door and pocketing the key. For hours, they negotiated, argued, and strategized. Morgan's goal was clear: create a pool of money to prop up failing institutions and restore confidence in the market. But convincing rival bankers to risk their own capital was no easy task. As the night wore on, tensions rose. Outside, the city held its breath, unaware of the high-stakes drama unfolding behind closed doors. By morning, Morgan had secured commitments for a multi-million-dollar rescue fund, but the crisis was far from over. News arrived that the city of New York itself was on the verge of bankruptcy. Without immediate action, police, firefighters, and other essential workers wouldn't be paid. Morgan now faced a dilemma. Saving the city would require an enormous sum, far more than he had already raised. And with each passing hour, the panic spread further, threatening to engulf the entire country. As Morgan worked tirelessly to save the financial system, questions began to surface about the concentration of power in his hands. Critics argued that no private individual should wield such influence over the nation's economy. Meanwhile, Morgan's actions grew bolder. He strong-armed reluctant bankers into contributing more funds. He personally pledged millions of his own money, and in a controversial move, he orchestrated the takeover of a major steel company by U.S. Steel, a corporation he controlled. This last action required the approval of President Theodore Roosevelt, who had made a name for himself as a trust buster. Would the president set aside his principles in the face of national crisis? In the end, Morgan's efforts prevailed. By November, the immediate crisis had passed. The stock market stabilized, banks reopened, and a full-scale depression was averted. But the panic of 1907 left a lasting legacy. It exposed the fragility of America's financial system and the dangers of relying on a money trust, led by private bankers like Morgan. In response, Congress established the National Monetary Commission to study the crisis. Their conclusion? The United States needed a central bank to prevent future panics. This recommendation led directly to the creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913. J.P. Morgan had saved the day, but his actions ultimately spelled the end of an era. Never again would a private citizen hold such sway over the nation's finances. The Panic of 1907 marked both the pinnacle of Morgan's power and the beginning of a new age of government regulation in American finance.